The distant sound of gunfire was the last thing I heard before my world ended. It was 1876 in a dusty little settlement called Redemption Creek, a town that had just decided it didn't want me anymore. They'd gathered on the steps of the new courthouse, the whole town, to watch Mayor Hollister cast me out. The charges were ridiculous: theft, witchcraft, a pack of lies cooked up so they could feel good about destroying a 22-year-old woman. I stood there with my chin up, trying to look brave, but tears were burning my eyes. My parents were gone. This town was all I had left, and now they were taking that too. "Be gone by sundown," the mayor roared, his face red and puffy with fake piety. "Anyone who helps her will face the same judgment." The crowd started to drift away, some of them ashamed, most of them just unscared. I was alone, clutching the tiny bundle of things they'd let me keep. And that's when everything changed. From the edge of the crowd, a man stepped forward. Riker Dawson. He was a quiet cowboy, new to town, kept to himself. Most folks were a little afraid of him. He had these piercing blue eyes that looked like they'd seen too much of the world, and he always had a hand resting near the Colt at his hip. He'd been leaning against a hitching post, just watching. But now he pushed off the post, settled his hat on his head, and swung onto his big chestnut stallion. He didn't rush. Every move was slow, deliberate. He rode that horse right through the last of the gawkers, right up to me as I started my long walk out of town. The street went dead silent. Everyone just stared. The quiet cowboy was finally making his move. He pulled his horse up beside me, matching my pace. "Miss Winters," he said, and his voice was low, but it carried. "She belongs with me." I just stared at him. Me? Belong with him? I'd barely said 10 words to the man. Surprise must have been written all over my face. One of the councilmen, a weasel named Porter, stepped forward, his hand on his own gun. "Dawson, you help her, and you're an outcast too." Riker didn't even look at him. His eyes were locked on mine. "Reckon it's time I moved on anyway." He held out his hand, a big, calloused hand. "My place is a day's ride north. It's not fancy, but it's safe. Trust a stranger or die alone in the desert?" Those were my choices. Something in his eyes, a kind of hard-won honesty, made the decision for me. "Why?" I whispered. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I know a rigged game when I see one," he said. Simple as that. I put my hand in his. He pulled me up onto the horse behind him, and just like that, we rode out of Redemption Creek. The whispers of the town faded away, leaving only the sound of hoofbeats and the feeling that my life hadn't ended after all. It had just begun. We rode for hours without saying a word. The sun was a hammer in the sky. I held onto his waist, trying not to lean against him, trying to keep a respectful distance. Finally, I couldn't stand the silence anymore. "Thank you," I said, my voice thin against the wind. "But you've ruined yourself in that town for me." He just shrugged. "Wasn't much to keep me there. Got my 160 acres up by the canyon. Was planning to move out for good anyway." I gave a bitter little laugh. "And now you've got a witch for a neighbor." He pulled the horse to a stop at a creek and swung down, offering me a hand. He passed me his canteen. "Those folks in town are fools," he said, his voice flat. "This was never about witchcraft." He let that hang in the air for a moment. "Then what was it about?" I asked, taking a long drink of the cool water. He took the canteen back, his eyes scanning the horizon like it was a habit. "It's about your land, Miss Winters. Simple as that. Hollister's been wanting it since your father passed." I froze. "How did you know about my father's land?" "Small town. People talk. Your pa's 40 acres borders my northern fence line," he explained. "It's got the best water access in the valley, and Hollister's been buying up every scrap of land he can get his hands on." He paused, then delivered the final piece of the puzzle. "The railroad is coming." It hit me like a physical blow. The railroad. It hadn't been announced, but of course Hollister would know. He had connections. "My land," I whispered, understanding dawning. "It's right where they'd build a depot." "Exactly," Riker said. "And he just found an easy way to steal it." My shoulders slumped. "It doesn't matter. They have it now." "Maybe," Riker said, helping me back onto the horse. "And maybe not. You have the deed, don't you?" "It's in the house. They wouldn't let me get my things. My heart sank. The one thing that could prove my ownership was in their hands. He swung up behind me, taking the reins. Then our first problem is getting you somewhere safe. Our second problem, he said, his voice turning hard as iron, is figuring out how to get it back. But I had a sinking feeling. What chance did two outcasts have against a man who owned a whole town? The odds were impossible, and I had no idea things were about to get a whole lot worse. As the sun began to dip low, painting the sky in fiery colors, the landscape changed. We were in rolling hills now, dotted with pine trees. I was so tired I could barely sit up, and I found myself leaning back against his chest. He didn't seem to mind. "Almost there," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Just over this ridge." We crested the hill, and I saw it. A small, perfect valley nestled below, with a clear stream cutting through it. A sturdy little cabin sat near a grove of cottonwoods, with a barn and corral beside it. And then I saw the smoke, a lazy curl of it, rising from the stone chimney. I tensed up instantly. "Someone's there." "That'll be Virgil," Riker said, not sounding concerned at all. "He's my ranch hand. A good man. Been helping me build the place." As we got closer, an old man with a long silver beard stepped out of the barn. He was holding a rifle. He kept it ready until he saw it was Riker. Then he raised a hand. His eyes widened when he saw me. "This is unexpected," the old man said as we dismounted. His face was a road map of wrinkles, impossible to read. "Virgil, this is Willow Winters," Riker said, his voice calm. "Hollister and his pack of dogs ran her out of town. She'll be staying with us." A flicker of something, understanding, maybe anger, crossed Virgil's face. He nodded, and this time his expression was warmer. "Figured it was coming to that. Town's gone sour." He stuck out a weathered hand to me. "Welcome, Miss Winters. It's not much, but you're safe here." The relief was so powerful, my knees almost buckled. Riker noticed and steered me toward the cabin. "Virgil, see to the horses. Miss Winters needs to eat." Inside, a hearty stew was bubbling over the fire. It smelled like heaven. The cabin was simple, just one big room with two doors leading off it. "You can have my room," Riker said, pointing to one of the doors. "I'll bunk with Virgil." I tried to protest, but he just gave me a gentle look. "It's just a bed, Miss Winters. Clean and dry. Now sit." I ate like I hadn't seen food in a week, listening as Riker told Virgil the whole story. Virgil just stroked his beard, his eyes thoughtful. "They called me a witch," I said quietly, the shame of it still stinging. "Because I used my mother's herbs for healing. Mrs. Porter's baby. It came too early. I tried to save it, but I couldn't. They used that against me." Riker's jaw was a hard line. "Convenient for them, wasn't it?" We sat in silence for a moment. Then Virgil spoke, his voice low and serious. "Riker," he said, "there's something else. You said Hollister wants the land for the railroad." "That's right," Riker said. "Well," Virgil said, looking from me to Riker, "he's not the only one. A man came by here 2 days ago, said he was a surveyor, but he wasn't. He was asking questions. About you, Riker. About this valley, and about the land that borders yours to the south. My land. He offered to buy your claim, Riker," Virgil said. "Said a powerful man in Prescott wanted this whole area. Offered a lot of money." Riker went still. "What man?" "He didn't say a name," Virgil said. "Just that this man doesn't like competition, and he doesn't take no for an answer." A cold dread trickled down my spine. This wasn't just about a greedy mayor in a small town. This was bigger. We hadn't just made an enemy of Mayor Hollister. We had stumbled into a war with someone far more powerful, and we were standing right in their way. After Virgil's revelation, the simple cabin felt less like a sanctuary and more like the calm in the eye of a storm. The fire crackled, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Virgil excused himself to do his evening chores, leaving me alone with Riker. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken questions. Finally, I had to ask, "Why did you really do it, Riker? Not just the justice talk, the truth." He stared into the fire for a long time. So long I thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. "When I was a boy back in Kansas, my mother was a midwife. She knew herbs, just like you. She spoke her mind. The town council didn't like it. He poked at the logs with an iron rod. They ran her out, accused her of the same nonsense. No one stood up for her. Not a soul. He looked at me then, and his blue eyes were bleak. She didn't make it through the winter. My hand moved on its own, covering his where it rested on the rough-hewn table. I'm so sorry. He just gave a single, sharp nod. Get some rest, Miss Winters. We'll figure out how to get your land back tomorrow. Willow, I said softly. My name is Willow. For the first time all day, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. Willow, good night. I slept in his bed that night, on clean sheets that smelled of pine and leather and him. But my sleep was haunted by shadows. The shadow of Riker's mother, cast out and alone. And the shadow of this nameless, powerful man from Prescott who wanted our land. I had a feeling this fight was going to cost us more than we could ever imagine. I woke the next morning to the smell of frying salt pork. Virgil was at the hearth, his back to me. Mornin', miss, he said without turning around. Riker's out on the north pasture. Be back around noon. As I ate the breakfast he cooked, Virgil started talking. He told me he and Riker had met a few years back. Virgil had been cheated out of his own land, left with nothing. Riker found him, gave him a job, and then a partnership. He's a good man, Virgil said, his voice full of conviction. Quiet, but solid as a rock. He gave me a shrewd look. He told you about his mother, I take it. I nodded. That's part of why he's helping you. But it ain't the whole story. He leaned forward a little. I've seen how he looks at you in town when he thinks no one's watching. Like a man looking at something he wants but feels he's got no right to. I felt a blush creep up my neck. You must be mistaken. Ain't mistaken, Virgil said, getting up from the table. Now you feeling useful? The garden needs tending. I spent the morning working with Virgil, grateful for the distraction. The sun was warm, the work was honest, and for a few hours I could almost forget the trouble we were in. Just after noon I heard hoofbeats. It was Riker. But he wasn't alone. He was leading a second horse, a beautiful, dappled mare. He swung down from his stallion. Afternoon, he said, his eyes taking me in. Virgil put you to work, I see. I insisted, I said. He gestured to the mare. Her name's Penny. Figured you'd need a horse of your own. Can't have you stuck out here. I was stunned. I can't accept this. It's too much. It's not a gift, he said, his voice firm but gentle. It's practical. We have to ride to Prescott to file a claim against Hollister. It's a 3-day journey. Before I could argue, Virgil called out from the cabin door. Stew's on, and we've got company. He pointed toward the south. A rider was coming, kicking up a cloud of dust. Riker's hand went to his gun instantly. We all stood there watching as the lone figure grew closer. It wasn't one of the nameless man's thugs. It was someone I knew. It's Doc Sullivan, I gasped. From town. The old doctor looked exhausted. He slid off his horse, his face grim. Thank God I found you, Willow. I came to warn you. He looked at Riker. I wasn't followed, but Hollister's men are watching the main roads. We hurried him inside. Over a bowl of stew, he told us what had happened since we left. The town was buzzing. Hollister had officially filed a claim on my land, saying it was abandoned. Too fast, too eager. It made people suspicious. Jacob at the store started asking questions, Doc said, loudly. He's making trouble for the mayor. Then the doctor pulled a leather portfolio from his saddlebags. But that's not the main reason I came. He handed it to me. I opened it. Inside was my father's deed to our land. Tears sprang to my eyes. How? Jacob got it from your house before Hollister's men could ransack the place. He asked me to bring it to you. Doc Sullivan took a deep breath, his expression turning grave. But that's not the warning. Willow, it's worse than just Hollister. He's not working alone. Riker and I exchanged a look. The man from Prescott, Riker said. Doc's eyes widened. You know? How? He sent someone to my claim, Riker explained. His name is Silas Blackwood, the doctor said, his voice barely a whisper. He's a railroad baron. He wants to control the entire valley. He buys what he can, and he crushes what he can't. Hollister is just his puppet. The name Silas Blackwood landed in the room like a stone. He was infamous throughout the territory, a ruthless man who left a trail of ruined lives wherever he went. That's not all, Doc said, leaning closer. Hollister was bragging in the saloon last night, drunk. Said Blackwood was sending some men to convince Mr. Dawson to sell his claim. Men who are good at persuading people. Hired guns. My blood ran cold. They weren't just coming for our land anymore. They were coming for us. The safe little cabin in the valley suddenly felt like a trap, and the 3-day ride to Prescott felt like an impossible journey across a hunting ground where we were the prey. After Doc Sullivan left, a heavy silence settled over the homestead. The deed to my land was a small comfort against the chilling reality of our situation. We were up against Silas Blackwood, a man who played for keeps. The ride to Prescott wasn't just a legal trip anymore. It was a gamble with our lives. We leave at dawn, Riker said, his voice a low, determined growl. We'll take the high trail through the rocks. It's harder, but they'll expect us on the main route. That night the air was tense. Every snap of a twig, every hoot of an owl sounded like a threat. I lay in my room clutching the old deed, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The next 2 days were a blur of hard riding. Riker pushed us and the horses, his eyes constantly scanning the jagged ridges around us. He was a different man out here in the wild, more alert, more dangerous. He taught me to read the signs, to listen to the silence of the wilderness. He moved with a quiet competence that was both terrifying and reassuring. On the second night, we made a cold camp, no fire to give away our position. We sat huddled together for warmth, sharing jerky and hardtack. My father died at Shiloh, Riker said suddenly, his voice quiet in the immense darkness. I had a younger sister, Emma. We lost her and my mother the same winter. He looked at me, his face a mask of shadows. Been on my own ever since. I don't run from bullies, Willow. Not anymore. In that moment, under a blanket of a million stars, I saw the man behind the quiet cowboy. A man forged by loss. A man who would rather fight and lose than back down. And I realized, with a jolt that had nothing to do with the cold, that I was starting to feel something for him. Something deep and terrifyingly real. It was on the afternoon of the third day that they found us. We were cutting through a narrow canyon, the rock walls rising high on either side. There was no way out but forward or back. Suddenly, Riker pulled his horse to a sharp halt. I listened, and then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of horses coming up fast behind us. Ahead, Riker hissed. Now! We spurred our horses, galloping through the winding canyon. The hoofbeats behind us grew louder, closer. A shot rang out, the bullet ricocheting off the rock wall with a sharp whine. Up ahead, the canyon opened into a small rocky basin, but it was a dead end. We were trapped. 3 riders burst into the basin behind us, blocking the only exit. They were rough-looking men, with cold, dead eyes and guns drawn. The man in the middle, a burly brute with a scarred face, grinned. Mr. Dawson, he drawled, Mr. Blackwood sends his regards. He'd like to make you a final offer for your land. I'm not selling, Riker said, his voice dangerously calm. His hand hovered over his Colt. Penny shifted nervously under me. The man's grin widened. That's the wrong answer. He raised his pistol. The offer is this. You sign over your deed, and we let the pretty lady live. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. There was no escape. 3 of them, 2 of us. The math was simple and deadly. Riker didn't even hesitate. Go to hell, he said. And then the world exploded in gunfire. But the shots didn't come from the men in front of us. They came from above, from the rim of the canyon. One of the hired guns cried out and tumbled from his saddle. The other 2 spun around in confusion, firing wildly up at the rocks. Now, Willow! Riker yelled, drawing his own gun. He fired, and the scar-faced man grunted, clutching his shoulder as his horse reared. I didn't wait to see more. I dug my heels into Penny's sides and charged past the chaos, my heart hammering against my ribs. Riker was right behind me, his gun barking in the enclosed space. We didn't stop. We galloped out of that canyon of death and didn't look back. We rode until the horses were lathered and shaking, until the sun had set and the moon was high in the sky. When we finally stopped in a hidden grove miles away, we just looked at each other, breathing hard. "Who was that?" I finally managed to ask. "Up on the ridge?" Riker was checking his revolver, his face grim. "That," he said, "was Virgil." I stared at him. "Virgil? But he stayed at the homestead." "I asked him to follow us," Riker said, "a day behind, to watch our backs." He looked up at me, a flicker of a smile in his eyes. "Told you he was a good man to have at your back." The realization hit me. Riker hadn't just been running. He'd had a plan. He had led them into that canyon on purpose. It was a trap. We were alive because of his foresight, and because of the loyalty of an old ranch hand with a rifle. We had won the first battle, but Blackwood wasn't a man who would take this loss lightly. We hadn't just escaped. We had declared war. And the next battle would be fought not with guns, but with lies and laws, in a place I was even less prepared for: the city of Prescott. Prescott was a different world. It was a bustling, sprawling town, bigger than anything I had ever seen. The noise, the people, the sheer size of it was overwhelming. After days on the trail, running for our lives, walking down a street full of well-dressed strangers felt surreal. Riker found us a respectable boarding house. For the first time in days, I had a real bath, in a real tub. As I washed away the dirt and the fear, I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked different, older, harder. That evening, Riker took me to a small restaurant. He had shaved, put on a clean shirt. He looked handsome, and my heart did a little flip that I tried my best to ignore. "First thing tomorrow, we see a lawyer," he said over a plate of roast chicken. "Then we file your claim at the land office. We use the law against them." "You think it's that simple?" I asked. "A man like Blackwood, he probably owns the lawyers too." "We just need one honest man," Riker said. "One judge who can't be bought." The lawyer he found was a man named Abernathy. He was a small, bookish man with sharp eyes. We told him the whole story: the fake accusations, Hollister, the railroad, Silas Blackwood, the ambush in the canyon. He listened without interrupting, making careful notes. When we were done, he leaned back in his chair. "I've been hearing whispers about Blackwood for months," he said. "He's been using local thugs like your Mayor Hollister to force homesteaders out all over the territory. Most people are too scared to fight back." He looked at me, a spark of admiration in his eyes. "You, Miss Winters, are the first one to bring me a real case. And with this deed," he tapped the paper on his desk, "we have a fighting chance." He looked at Riker. "My own family lost their ranch to a man like Blackwood back east. That's why I came out here, to see that the law means something." He stood up. "I'll take your case, and I'll do it for free." A wave of hope, the first I'd felt in a long time, washed over me. Maybe Riker was right. Maybe one honest man was all we needed. We filed the claim. The clerk at the land office told us Judge Harmon would hear our case in 2 days. 2 days. It felt like a lifetime. That night, I couldn't sleep. The city felt like it was closing in on me. I crept out of the boarding house, needing air. I found Riker on the porch, staring out at the gaslit street. He didn't seem surprised to see me. We stood in silence for a long time. "Whatever happens in that courtroom," I said finally, "I'm grateful. For everything." He turned to look at me, his face serious in the dim light. "This isn't just about your land anymore, Willow. Not for me." He took a hesitant step closer. "It's about you." My heart started to pound. He reached out, his hand gently touching my cheek. "I've come to feel more than I should," he said, his voice a rough whisper. "Me too," I breathed. And then he kissed me. It wasn't a rough, desperate kiss. It was tender, searching. It spoke of shared danger and unspoken feelings. It was a promise of something I hadn't let myself dream of: a future. When we broke apart, the world felt a little less scary. We weren't just partners in a fight anymore. We were something more. But as we stood there, a man stepped out of the shadows across the street. He tipped his hat to us, a slow, deliberate gesture. A cruel smile played on his lips. It was the scar-faced man from the canyon, the one Riker had shot. His arm was in a sling. He didn't say a word. He just stood there watching us, his message clear. You can't escape us. We are everywhere. The fight wasn't over. It was following us, even here, in the heart of the law. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that Blackwood was planning to make sure we never even made it to the courtroom. The sight of that man, standing there like a ghost from our nightmares, shattered the fragile peace of our moment. Riker pushed me behind him, his body tensing like a coiled snake. The man just smirked, turned, and melted back into the shadows. We need to get inside, Riker said, his voice low and urgent. The boarding house no longer felt safe. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the hall, felt like a threat. The next day and a half leading up to the hearing was pure agony. We stayed close to the boarding house, never going out alone. Riker's gun was always visible. The city, which had seemed so full of hope, now felt like a cage, and we were the cornered animals. The morning of the hearing, we walked to the courthouse with Mr. Abernathy. The red brick building was supposed to represent justice, but all I felt was fear. The courtroom was packed. Word had gotten out. On one side there was me, Riker, and our small bookish lawyer. On the other side sat Mayor Hollister, flanked by an expensive-looking lawyer from Prescott, a man I knew must be on Blackwood's payroll. Silas Blackwood himself was nowhere to be seen. He was too smart for that. He let his puppets do the dirty work. Judge Harmon was a stern-looking man with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. The day was a blur of legal arguments. Mr. Abernathy was brilliant. He laid out the facts piece by piece. The timeline that showed the witchcraft accusations only started after the railroad survey. He presented my father's deed. He told the story of a woman being run off her rightful land by a corrupt mayor. Hollister's lawyer, Mr. Whitaker, was slick. He painted me as an unstable, dangerous hermit. He twisted my knowledge of herbs into something sinister. He called Hollister a concerned civic leader, trying to protect his town. It was a performance, and he was good at it. I could feel the eyes of the crowd on me, judging, wondering. Then I was called to the stand. My hands were trembling as I took the oath. Whitaker came at me hard, trying to twist my words, trying to make me angry, to make me look like the unhinged woman he described. But I thought of Riker, and I thought of his mother, and I kept my voice steady. I told the truth. Riker testified next. He was calm, solid, unshakable. He told the court what he had seen. He spoke of injustice. Whitaker tried to paint him as a drifter, a gunslinger who had some romantic notion about saving me. Is it not true, Mr. Dawson, Whitaker sneered, that you have developed personal feelings for Miss Winters? Riker looked him straight in the eye. I have developed a deep respect for her courage, he said, his voice ringing with sincerity. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty. The day ended, and the judge announced he would resume in the morning. We had survived the first round. As we were leaving the courthouse, Mr. Abernathy pulled us aside. They're losing, he whispered, a triumphant glint in his eye. Whitaker is desperate. Be ready for anything tomorrow. But we weren't ready. We couldn't have been. The next morning, Whitaker announced he had a surprise witness. A woman was brought forward. I recognized her. Mrs. Gable from Redemption Creek, a woman I had treated with an herbal tonic for her cough just a month before I was cast out. She looked terrified. On the stand, she began to sob. She told the court that my tonic had made her sick, that it was poison, that I had tried to kill her. It was a lie, a monstrous lie. I felt the blood drain from my face. The whole courtroom started whispering. I could see the doubt in the judge's eyes. This was it. This was how Blackwood was going to win. He couldn't kill us with guns, so he was going to kill me with words. Mr. Abernathy looked shaken. He had no way to fight this. We were done for. I looked over at Riker. His face was like stone, his eyes burning with a cold fire. As Abernathy stood to cross-examine the weeping woman, Riker suddenly stood up. Your Honor, he said, his voice cutting through the hushed courtroom, I have evidence that this witness is lying. The judge looked down, his expression severe. Mr. Dawson, you are out of order. With all due respect, Your Honor, Riker said, taking a step forward, this is a matter of life and death. He held up a piece of paper. This is a telegram. I received it this morning. Whitaker jumped to his feet. Objection! This is a circus. Overruled, Judge Harmon snapped, his curiosity piqued. Let's see what this is about. Read the telegram, Mr. Dawson. Riker's voice was clear and steady. It's from a man named Jacob, who runs the general store in Redemption Creek. It says, Mrs. Gable's husband owes Mayor Hollister $500 in gambling debts. Hollister threatened to ruin him, to take their farm, unless she testified against Willow. He's being blackmailed. The courtroom erupted. Mrs. Gable let out a choked sob and collapsed on the witness stand. Mayor Hollister leaped to his feet, his face purple with rage, screaming that it was all lies. But the judge wasn't looking at him. He was looking at the telegram in Riker's hand. He was looking at the broken woman on the stand. He slammed his gavel down, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Order! Order in this court! The truth was out. The lie had been exposed. But in the chaos, I saw Hollister's eyes. They were filled with pure hatred, and they were fixed on Riker. He had lost everything, and he was going to make someone pay. The courtroom was chaos, but Judge Harmon's voice cut through it like a blade. He ordered the bailiffs to take a hysterical Mrs. Gable into his chambers. He ordered Mayor Hollister to sit down and be silent. Then he looked at Riker, then at the telegram, then at me. After what felt like an eternity, he delivered his ruling. My claim to my land was valid. Hollister's claim was fraudulent. The town council of Redemption Creek was ordered to ensure my safe return. And then, the final blow. He announced a full investigation by the territorial governor into the actions of Mayor Hollister and his connection to the land-grabbing schemes of Silas Blackwood. We had won. I felt the tears I'd been holding back for so long finally break free. Riker's arm came around me, pulling me close. You did it, Willow, he whispered. Your home is yours. As we left the courthouse, blinking in the bright sunlight, it felt like waking from a long nightmare. Mr. Abernathy was ecstatic. Even the newspaper editor was there, promising to print the whole story, to expose Blackwood for the criminal he was. But as we walked down the steps, I saw him. Hollister. He was standing by the street, his face a twisted mask of fury. His career was over. His reputation was in tatters. He had nothing left to lose. His hand was inside his coat. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. I saw the glint of metal. I saw him pull the gun. Riker! I screamed. I threw myself in front of him, just as the gun went off. A searing pain exploded in my side. The world tilted, the blue sky spinning into a black void. The last thing I heard was my name, screamed in a voice of pure agony. I woke up to the smell of antiseptic and the soft light of a lamp. I was in a clean bed. My side was tightly bandaged, and it ached with a dull, throbbing pain. Riker was sitting in a chair beside the bed, his head in his hands. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Riker? My voice was a dry croak. His head snapped up. The relief that washed over his face was so intense, it was painful to see. He was by my side in an instant, his hand gently taking mine. Willow, you're awake. What happened? I whispered. Hollister shot you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. The bullet went clean through. The doctor said you were lucky. An inch to the left. He couldn't finish. Hollister's in jail. He'll hang. I lay there processing it all. We had won, but it had almost cost me my life. It had almost cost me him. You saved my life, he said quietly, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. You took a bullet for me. You saved mine first, I whispered. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at me, his blue eyes so full of feeling it stole my breath away. When I thought I'd lost you, Willow, I realized something. This isn't just about two homesteads next to each other. It's not just about fighting a common enemy. He took a deep breath. I love you, Willow Winters. I think I have since the first time I saw you stand up to those bullies in town. I don't want to imagine a life without you in it. He slid off the chair and knelt by the bed, never letting go of my hand. I know this is a hell of a time to ask, but when you're well, when we go home, I want us to go home together, as husband and wife. Marry me, Willow. Tears, this time of pure joy, streamed down my face. In the span of a few weeks, I had been cast out, hunted, shot, and vindicated. I had lost everything, and then I had found everything that truly mattered. Yes, I whispered. Yes, Riker Dawson. I'll marry you. His smile was like the sun coming up after a long, dark night. He leaned in and kissed me, gently, carefully, a kiss that sealed a promise forged in fire and blood. Our return to Redemption Creek was very different from our departure. We rode in side by side, with Virgil trailing behind us, grinning like a fool. The story of the trial and of Hollister's cowardly attack had preceded us. People came out of their shops to watch us pass. Some looked away, ashamed, but many more smiled and waved. Doc Sullivan and Jacob were there to greet us, their faces beaming. We reclaimed my cabin, and the first thing I did was walk through the rooms that held so many memories. It was my past, but my future was standing in the doorway, watching me with love in his eyes. We were married a month later in the small church in town. The whole town, it seemed, turned out. They were celebrating more than a wedding. They were celebrating a second chance, a redemption. We joined our two pieces of land. We built a new house right on the line between them. We built a life. The railroad came, just as predicted, but Silas Blackwood's power in the territory was broken. The newspaper stories had led to more investigations and more brave homesteaders coming forward. His empire of fear began to crumble. Years passed. We had two children, a boy with his father's steady blue eyes, and a girl with my wild honey brown hair. Our ranch flourished. My healing practice grew. The valley was our sanctuary. One evening I was standing on our porch, watching Riker teach our son to ride. The setting sun bathed the valley in a golden light. It was so peaceful, so perfect, it was hard to believe the violence and fear that had brought us here. Riker looked up and caught my eye, and he smiled that slow, quiet smile that was just for me. In that moment, I knew. Sometimes your world has to crumble so you can build a new one. Sometimes you have to be cast out to find where you truly belong. The worst day of my life had led me to the best life I could ever imagine. And it all started when a quiet cowboy rode up and said the truest words I'd ever heard. She belongs with me. If you enjoyed this story of how love and justice can win against all odds, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more tales from the strange and mysterious side of history.